No one could handle the millionaire's twin daughters until the new nanny did this. Richard Lawson had everything a man could dream of. At 42, he was a health tech billionaire in New York, head of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and praised as one of the most brilliant minds in the industry. His office towered above the city, a symbol of power and success. Yet behind those shining glass walls lay a tragedy no amount of money could erase. 2 years earlier, in a sudden car accident, his wife Anna had been taken from him forever. Richard lost his partner in life, while his twin daughters, 9-year-old Emily and Sophie, lost the mother they adored. That single blow shattered the Lawson family. Once cheerful and well-behaved, the girls transformed into rebellious little angels of chaos, filled with anger and defiance. The luxurious Manhattan home that once echoed with laughter had turned into a battlefield. In just 2 years, no fewer than 15 nannies had come and gone, many breaking down within days. Richard, a man capable of solving complex problems in business, found himself powerless in the face of his own children. He buried himself in work, not because of necessity, but because it was easier than confronting his grief and the broken pieces of his family. And then, just when Richard believed all hope was gone, someone unexpected stepped into their lives. She had no experience, no reputation, nothing that would make her seem qualified. Yet she carried something no one else had, a heart brave enough to see past rebellion, to recognize the silent pain beneath, and to believe that even the most wounded family could learn how to heal. Richard Lawson often stood by the massive glass window of his 58th floor office, staring out at the city below. He could command thousands of employees, sign contracts worth hundreds of millions, yet the thought of Emily and Sophie made him feel powerless, like the most profound failure. The Manhattan home, once filled with love, now resembled a war zone. Emily and Sophie weren't just mischievous, they seemed to have declared war on the world. One day, they mixed sugar with salt and scattered it all over the kitchen, driving the chef to tears. Another time, they dismantled the television remotes and hid each tiny piece inside flower vases. These weren't innocent pranks. They were angry cries for help that no words could express. Richard had tried everything. He hired renowned child psychologists, paid thousands of dollars to behavioral experts, even brought in a specialized life coach for children. But every time a new face walked through the door, Emily and Sophie built their walls higher. They refused to talk, refused to trust, and turned every effort into a cruel game. Over 2 years, the list of failed nannies grew longer. Experienced women, stern men, even retired teachers. None lasted more than a week. Some left in tears, others fled without even packing their belongings. One young nanny barely survived 4 hours before quitting. Richard knew the truth. Anna's death had left a void that could never be filled. He suffered too, but unlike him, Emily and Sophie couldn't hide their grief. They expressed it through rebellion, through bitter laughter, through chaos. And Richard, instead of embracing them, had chosen distance. More and more nights, he stayed late at the office, using work as an excuse, because going home meant facing 2 angry pairs of eyes and a house echoing with screams. He didn't know how to speak to his daughters, didn't dare mention Anna's name, fearing that one word might shatter the fragile calm. At times, staring at his reflection, Richard asked himself, "Who am I? A billionaire, a man celebrated for success, yet unable to be a father to the 2 children I love most?" That question gnawed at him daily. His deepest fear was not losing his empire, but losing Emily and Sophie forever. And in that darkest moment, when every door seemed closed, fate was already preparing to open a new path. After the last nanny burst into tears and resigned on a Monday morning, Richard sat motionless at his desk, papers scattered everywhere. He had grown used to this scene, but familiarity didn't make it hurt any less. It felt as though every door had been shut, leaving no hope for his family. That was when Mrs. Bennet, his loyal secretary of over 10 years, knocked and entered. She wasn't one to speak much, but her eyes carried an unusual firmness that day. "Mr. Lawson," she began, her voice calm yet resolute, "I think it's time you tried something different." Richard looked up, weary. How many different ways had he already tried? Psychologists, teachers, coaches, none had succeeded. What other way could possibly exist, he asked, bitterness creeping into his tone. Mrs. Bennet answered slowly, "My niece, Clara. She's 26, just graduated with a degree in psychology. She has no experience as a nanny, but I believe she has something the others don't. Sincerity." Richard frowned. The last thing he needed was another inexperienced person walking in, only to quit days later. But the look in Mrs. Bennet's eyes made him hesitate. She had been by his side since the company's earliest days, always loyal, always wise. If she dared to make this suggestion, she must truly believe in it. That afternoon, Clara arrived. From his window, Richard saw a young woman, tall, with brown hair tied neatly back, dressed simply but with care. She carried no air of authority, no polished professionalism like those before her. Instead, she wore a radiant, genuine smile. Inside Richard, worry stirred. If seasoned experts had all failed, what could a young girl possibly accomplish? Yet, in that same moment, he realized he had nothing left to lose. And perhaps it was precisely this difference that might open a door he had never thought to try. When Clara entered the corporate lounge, Richard glanced up briefly. He had prepared a polite nod and a few formal words, just enough to appease Mrs. Bennet. But when his eyes met the clear, steady gaze of the young woman, he hesitated. "Do you have any idea how difficult this job really is?" he asked, his voice low, heavy with doubt. Clara didn't flinch. "I do, Mr. Lawson. I don't expect Emily and Sophie to welcome me right away. I only ask for the chance to understand them, instead of trying to control them." Richard frowned. "You have no experience. I've tried the very best and they all failed. Why should I believe you'll be any different?" Clara smiled, not hurriedly, but with quiet sincerity. "Because I'm not here to prove myself to you. I'm here to listen to them. And sometimes what children need isn't an expert. It's simply someone patient enough to stay by their side." Richard fell silent. Her words lingered in his mind. He knew the risk, but he also knew he had run out of options. After a moment's pause, he gave a slight nod. "All right, you'll start today." The grand doors of the Lawson home opened with a soft echo, and Clara stepped inside, her heart racing. Not out of fear, but from the weight of knowing all eyes were on her. Richard led her through the wide hallway, lined with artwork and antiques, everything elegant, yet strangely cold. In the living room, Emily and Sophie were already waiting. The girls wore neat little dresses, seated on an expensive white leather sofa, their expressions defiant. In front of them sat a glass of water teetering on the edge of the table, with a few toys scattered carelessly on the floor, too perfect to be accidental. Clara instantly understood. This was a test. Every nanny before had likely fallen for such traps, responding with scolding or fear. Clara took a breath, then chose the exact opposite. She walked over to the table, picked up the glass, drank it in one gulp, set it back firmly, and smiled as she lowered herself onto the floor among the toys. "So," she said playfully, "which one of you is the better fortress builder?" Emily and Sophie exchanged a startled glance. This wasn't the reaction they had expected. Their provocation had been turned into an invitation. For a brief moment, the challenge in their eyes gave way to curiosity. From the doorway, Richard watched in disbelief. What had always marked the beginning of endless battles was, in seconds, transformed into a chance for connection. Clara began stacking cushions with the girls, turning the elegant sofa into a miniature castle. She didn't introduce herself as the new nanny, didn't lay down rules, didn't mention their mother. She simply acted like a friend, genuinely interested in knowing them. Emily, careful and controlling, fussed whenever Sophie placed a cushion out of line. Sophie, lively and impulsive, wanted to break rules just for fun. Clara quietly observed, never rushing to correct, only guiding and redirecting their energy with gentle encouragement. When the fortress was finished, the once cold, luxurious room had transformed into a world of imagination. Laughter rang out, an echo Richard hadn't heard in his home for far too long. For the first time in many weary months, Emily and Sophie weren't angry rebels pushing the world away. They were simply two 9-year-old girls, curious and eager to be loved. The first day passed unlike any other in the Lawson household. When Richard came home that evening, he didn't find the usual chaos. No shouting, no nanny packing in despair. Instead, he found Clara in the kitchen with Emily and Sophie, the three of them sharing cookies and laughing. It was a sound he had nearly forgotten. In the days that followed, Clara introduced a completely different approach. She didn't lay down rules, nor did she threaten with punishments. Whenever conflict arose, she turned it into a game. One morning, Emily and Sophie deliberately spilled milk across the table to test her. Instead of scolding, Clara handed them each a cloth and announced, "Whoever cleans it fastest and best gets to choose tonight's dessert." What began as mischief turned into a cheerful competition. Clara quickly realized the girls didn't need more control. They needed to feel important and useful. So she gave them positions in the household. Emily became the assistant chef, while Sophie was the safety inspector. Each day they eagerly checked the fridge, picked vegetables, or evaluated what in the house needed fixing. Instead of troublemakers, they began to feel like vital members of the family. In the evenings, Clara made it a habit to sit with the girls in the garden. One night, under the starry sky, she told them a story about two little princesses in a bright kingdom. When the queen had to leave on a journey far away and never returned, the princesses grew rebellious. They wreaked havoc in the castle, causing chaos in the court, not because they were bad, but because they were heartbroken. But as they learned to turn anger into cherished memories, their kingdom lit up once again. Emily and Sophie went silent. They saw themselves in the two princesses. For the first time in months, they spoke about their mother, not through yelling or rage, but through real tears. Emily remembered her mother's bedtime stories. Sophie recalled baking cookies together. They admitted they weren't just sad, but angry that their mother had left without saying goodbye. Clara didn't dismiss their feelings. She nodded, listened, and gently said, "Your feelings aren't wrong. Anger is just another way of saying you loved her so much." That acknowledgement broke down their walls. Emily and Sophie clung to Clara, sobbing into her arms. From that day on, Clara suggested creating a memory book. Every day, the three of them glued in pictures of Anna, wrote down little stories, and drew happy memories. The book grew thicker, and instead of being a painful shadow, their mother's memory became a treasure to cherish. Richard quietly observed the change. He saw his daughters laugh genuinely, play without destruction. More importantly, he saw them slowly transform their loss into strength. Clara had achieved what no expert ever could. She reached the girls' hearts, not through theory, but through love and patience. Richard had thought Clara was only there to help Emily and Sophie. But slowly he realized she was changing him as well. One evening, when he walked into the kitchen, he found the three of them mixing dough. In the past, such a scene would have ended in chaos. Flowers scattered everywhere, shouting, and a nanny on the verge of tears. But this time, Emily carefully measured, Sophie eagerly stirred, and Clara guided with ease, leaving a space for Richard to stand and watch. "Want to try?" Clara asked, handing him a wooden spoon. He hesitated, then took it. For the first time in 2 years, Richard kneaded dough alongside his daughters, feeling like he truly belonged there. Clara wasn't just teaching the girls, she was teaching Richard too. She showed him how to turn dinner into a time for conversation, sharing about his workday, listening to school stories. She encouraged him to read bedtime stories, not as a ritual, but as a chance for closeness. Slowly, Richard stopped isolating himself in his office after coming home. Instead, he learned to share time and even silence with his daughters. The change didn't happen overnight. At first, Emily and Sophie were cautious, unsure if their father would truly stay engaged. But day by day, as Richard patiently showed up in the smallest of moments, a short walk, laughter over a burnt cake, their trust began to return. One night, while reading a story to them, Richard's voice faltered at the mention of a mother character. He was about to stop, but Emily gently took his hand. "It's okay, Dad. I miss Mom too, but I want to hear the rest." For the first time, the three of them faced their loss directly, without avoidance. Richard realized that thanks to Clara, he had found the courage he had long buried. The more he watched Clara, the more grateful he became. She hadn't come to replace Anna, but to help him and his daughters find one another again. And in that process, he too was learning how to be a father, not perfect, but present, with a heart full of love. Richard didn't know when it began, but his eyes lingered on Clara longer than before. At first, it was simple gratitude for the young woman who had brought laughter back into his home. But over time, that gratitude grew into something deeper, something he thought he would never feel again after Anna's death. He kept those feelings hidden, unsure if it was right to acknowledge them. Yet destiny had a way of bringing truth to light, especially through the innocent voices of Emily and Sophie. Clara never tried to replace the role of the woman he had lost. She was simply present, through her bright smile, her patience, and her passionate heart. Richard found himself looking forward to evenings, not just to see Emily and Sophie happy, but to see Clara in the glow of the kitchen lights, her brown hair tied back, her eyes radiating warmth. For Clara, too, her heart was quietly changing. When she first accepted the role, she only hoped to help two little girls rediscover joy. But Richard, with his awkwardness, his occasional clumsiness, yet his genuine effort, stirred something inside her. She saw a man not perfect, but brave enough to learn how to love again. Love didn't arrive suddenly. It grew slowly, like sunlight slipping through morning blinds. Richard realized with each passing day that he wasn't only admiring the way Clara cared for Emily and Sophie, he was being drawn to who she was, gentle, intelligent, full of life. One afternoon, as Clara sat in the living room drawing with the girls, Richard paused at the doorway. He saw her leaning down, her hair brushing her shoulder, her laughter ringing bright, lighting up the entire room. Emily sketched a castle, while Sophie tried painting a flower but smeared color all over her hands. Clara didn't scold. She dipped her own finger in the paint and dabbed Sophie's nose, sending all three into a fit of giggles. Richard smiled, an expression he hadn't felt on his face for far too long. The closer he was to Clara, the more he realized she wasn't just healing his daughters. She was awakening in him emotions he thought had died with Anna. He began to look forward to evenings at home, not to hide away in his office, but to sit in the kitchen, listening to Clara share little stories of her day. Some nights they washed dishes together, and his hand brushed hers as he passed a plate. That simple touch, fleeting as it was, made his heart beat faster. Clara felt it too, though she tried to hide it. She knew she was there to help, not to replace Anna. But small moments grew impossible to ignore. Richard's gaze lingering as she read bedtime stories, the quiet teamwork of cleaning up after dinner, the way he listened with rare sincerity. No matter how she tried to silence it, her heart responded. One evening, the family took a walk in the park. Emily and Sophie ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the trees. Richard and Clara walked slowly behind. The night air was cool, and Clara pulled her scarf tighter. Almost instinctively, Richard adjusted it for her. In that pause, their eyes met. Neither spoke, but something unspoken passed between them. The space separating them was disappearing. The turning point came on the twins' 10th birthday. The party wasn't extravagant, just a small gathering with friends and family. Clara decorated every corner with balloons and paper flowers, and baked the cake with Emily and Sophie's eager help. When the candles flickered, the girls made their wish together. "We wish Clara will stay with us forever, and that Dad will smile like he used to." Those innocent words stunned Richard. He turned to Clara and saw her eyes glistening in the candlelight. In that moment, he understood. Clara wasn't just the one who brought laughter back to Emily and Sophie. She had given him hope, too. After the party, when the house had grown quiet, Richard and Clara tidied up the living room. The girls' laughter drifted faintly from upstairs. Richard hesitated, then said softly, "Thank you for everything. You haven't just helped Emily and Sophie. You've saved me, too." Clara stopped, her eyes meeting his, filled with tenderness but also a flicker of fear. "Richard," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I never wanted to replace anyone. I just wanted the girls to be happy." He stepped closer, his gaze steady and warm. "You haven't replaced Anna. No one ever could. But you've given us a chance to love again, and you've given me more than you realize." Clara didn't answer in words, but her shining eyes and the faint smile on her lips spoke louder than anything she could say. That night, as they retreated to their separate rooms, both knew something had taken root between them, something strong yet fragile, needing time and care to grow. In the days following the birthday, the bond between Richard and Clara grew even clearer. They kept their distance, but every glance, every small gesture made their hearts beat faster. One evening, after Emily and Sophie had gone to bed, Richard and Clara sat together in the living room. The soft lamp glow filled the silence, so quiet they could hear each other's breathing. Clara shared a story from her college days, and Richard laughed, a warm, deep laugh that had long been absent from the house. As she leaned forward to reach for a glass, their hands brushed. This time, Richard didn't pull away. He gently held her hand, their eyes meeting in silence. Clara blushed, then smiled. In that fragile moment, Richard leaned closer and pressed a tender, fleeting kiss to her lips. The next morning, at breakfast, Emily suddenly asked, "Dad, do you love Miss Clara?" Richard froze. Words caught in his throat, but Sophie giggled. "We already know. You smile more since she came. Our house is happier." Emily tilted her head, her innocent eyes shining. "If you love her, then marry her. We really like Miss Clara. She feels like part of the family already." Richard looked at his daughters, then at Clara. Her cheeks flushed crimson, but her eyes glowed with gentle warmth. He couldn't answer right away, but inside, Richard knew the girls had spoken the truth he had been too hesitant to admit. And from that moment, their love was no longer a secret. It had been recognized and blessed by the smallest hearts in the home. One evening, Richard prepared to do something he had never imagined doing a second time in his life. He arranged a small dinner in the backyard garden, stringing warm golden lights through the trees and setting a table beneath the greenery. Emily and Sophie helped Clara prepare flowers, but neither of them knew this day was more special than any other. After dinner, as Clara began clearing the dishes, Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. His heart pounded, but his gaze was steady. To Clara's astonishment, and to the cheers of Emily and Sophie, he knelt down. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking with emotion, "you've done what no one else could. You saved my daughters, and you saved me. I cannot imagine a future without you. Will you become an official part of the Lawson family?" Clara gasped, tears spilling before she could even speak. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. Emily and Sophie squealed with delight, jumping up and down before rushing to embrace them both. The wedding took place in a warm, intimate ceremony in the very garden where so much healing had begun. It needed no grandeur, only the presence of those who truly mattered. Emily and Sophie stood proudly as little bridesmaids, their faces glowing with joy. From that day on, the Lawson home officially became a new family. No one replaced Anna. Her memory remained cherished and whole. But now another woman, with a brave and loving heart, had joined to continue the unfinished story. Richard, Clara, Emily, and Sophie, 4 souls, 4 pieces of a puzzle, had found one another at last, completing the picture of a true family. 2 years after the wedding, the Lawson home was completely transformed. No more shouting, no more endless battles. Instead, laughter echoed through every room, the warm scent of baked cookies drifted from the kitchen, and afternoons were spent gathered as a family. Emily and Sophie, now 12 years old, had changed beyond recognition. They were no longer angry, destructive girls, but joyful, confident, and affectionate young teenagers. At school, they became sociable, joined group activities, played sports, and made new friends. Teachers noted not only their academic improvement, but also their ability to listen and show empathy, a sign Clara cherished as proof of healing hearts. Richard had changed as well. He learned to balance work and family. In the mornings, he drove his daughters to school. In the evenings, he put away his laptop to share dinner and stories about their days. Weekends were no longer spent in the office. Instead, he took the family to the park, on picnics, or simply sat in the garden while Clara and the girls planted flowers. Clara was not only a wonderful mother, but also fulfilled her own dream. With Richard's support, she opened a small center to help children and families coping with loss. Her experience with Emily and Sophie gave her both the motivation and the understanding to become a pillar for others. The most moving moment came on Emily and Sophie's 13th birthday. At the party, surrounded by friends and family, Emily held the microphone, her voice trembling yet determined. "I want to thank Dad for never stopping loving us, even when we were at our hardest. I want to thank Mom, Anna, who will always live in our hearts. But most of all, I want to thank Clara, the angel who saved our family." Sophie added, "Clara never tried to replace Mom Anna. She gave us a new kind of love, a new home. She taught us that family isn't just the people you're born with, but those who choose to stay with you in the hardest times." Their words moved the entire room to tears. Richard squeezed Clara's hand, his eyes shining with a happiness he once believed he would never find again. The Lawson family, once broken, now stood as living proof that love can heal even the deepest wounds. But life had yet another miracle in store for them, one that would expand their circle of love even further. The past 2 years had transformed everything. The house once shattered by loss was now a home where love not only returned, but multiplied. And then, one spring morning, Clara shared news that made Richard's heart nearly burst. She was pregnant. For a moment, Richard stood frozen, then pulled Clara into his arms. He couldn't believe life had given him such a miracle. When Emily and Sophie heard, they leapt with joy. "We're going to have a baby brother or sister," they cried, eyes sparkling. To them, it wasn't a replacement for their mother. It was a sign their family had truly entered a new chapter. The months of pregnancy were filled with anticipation and love. Emily and Sophie eagerly became little doctors, keeping notes on what Clara ate and how much she rested. Richard, once a man consumed only by work, transformed into a devoted husband and father. He learned to make breakfast, tend the garden, even read newborn care books with his daughters. On the day Clara went into labor, the whole family held their breath. Richard clasped her hand in the hospital, feeling every wave of her pain as if it were his own. When the first cry rang out, tears streamed down his face. A healthy baby boy, tiny and perfect, was placed in Clara's arms. Emily and Sophie rushed over, their eyes wet, whispering, "Welcome to the Lawson family, little one." The baby was named Daniel Lawson, a gift of hope, born from a past of sorrow and a present of light. From the moment Daniel arrived, the Lawson home overflowed with joy. Emily and Sophie became doting sisters, changing diapers, rocking him to sleep, competing for turns to hold him. Richard spent hours just watching his son breathe, sometimes weeping quietly from happiness. And Clara, surrounded by 3 children, 2 girls who weren't of her blood and 1 boy who was, knew she had found her true calling in life. One afternoon, as the family gathered in the garden, Richard wrapped his arms around Clara from behind and whispered, "I once thought my life had ended with Anna, but you've shown me love never ends. It simply changes shape and keeps on growing." Clara smiled through tears. The Lawson family was no longer the story of a desperate father and 2 broken children. They had become living proof that even out of ruins, a new home could be built. Anna would always remain part of their memory and love, but Clara and Daniel had written new pages filled with hope and light. That evening, the golden glow of sunset bathed the Lawson garden, painting the leaves in warm hues and lighting up the string of little bulbs hanging along the path. Clara sat on the bench, cradling Daniel in her arms as she softly hummed a lullaby. Emily and Sophie nestled close beside her, each holding one of their baby brother's tiny hands, taking turns telling him about the games they had played that day. Richard stood nearby, watching the 3 children and the woman who had transformed his entire life. A gentle breeze carried their laughter across the garden. To Richard, it wasn't just a sound, it was the heartbeat of a new home, a rhythm he once believed was lost forever. The family gathered around the wooden table in the garden. They shared a simple dinner, pasta Emily had helped cook, salads Sophie had mixed, and Clara's freshly baked apple pie. Daniel slept peacefully in a little cradle by their side, his face serene like an angel's. Raising his glass, Richard whispered, "We've walked through darkness, but now we've found the light, and the greatest gift is that we found it together." In that moment, there was no haunting past, no empty void, only a family, whole and united, wrapped in the quiet peace of love. Their laughter rose into the twilight sky, as if to say that no matter how deep the sorrow, love had the power to turn ruins into a home once more.